Hey, everybody, and we are live with Office Hours, episode number 4, with our partners from Acuity International, Jonathan Fake and Robert Leedy. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm excited to bring you an all-Army group here today. So we were just exchanging war stories. I'm going to get to that in a minute. I just heard something that blew my mind, but the science behind it makes so much sense. But if you're tuning in today, what I'd like you to do is let us know where you're tuning in from and what type of roles you're looking for or you're considering, because Jonathan and Robert may have something that meets your requirements. So Acuity International, before we get into that, I want to give people a time to dial in. I just heard something that blew my mind from Robert. So Robert's an old intel analyst from the Army, and his first assignment was in Fairbanks, Alaska. And he told me about a safety briefing they had about storing alcohol outside to cool it down. Robert, why don't you go ahead and share that if you're okay?
Yeah, I mean, I'm walking in as a PFC first unit, and my first safety brief was pretty much, hey, don't go drinking, don't fall outside, no one will find you. But also, hey, don't store your liquor outside either, because at -60, it still won't freeze. And when you bring it inside and start drinking it, well, your throat, everything will get frostbite and will not be a fun evening for you. Ooh. So if you ever do go to Fairbanks, please keep that in mind when you go up there.
I've been there, and I went during the summer. So
yeah, so
great
you had the
fishing,
right?
Yeah, well, great fishing. I went there the summer right before COVID, and it was like 90 degrees. It was 4th of July weekend. It was like 90 degrees. There was like forest fires, but they said they're normal. There were cabbages. Like, I'm not like this big because it's 22 and a half hours of sunlight. They were like this big, like just straight cabbages and vegetables. They were like superhuman. And I remember we drove down to Anchorage. The commanding general, U.S. Army Alaska at the time, invited us down there to speak. And they put me in the VIP housing on base. And I got there at night, and I remember trying to turn the air conditioning on. And it wasn't working because there was a thermostat with like an air conditioning button. And I was trying to turn it on. I actually called housing, and I was like, hey, I'm sorry, the air conditioning's not working. And they said, you're in Alaska. I'm like, and they're like, we don't have air conditioning in Alaska. There's not a need. And I'm like, but no, it's they didn't have to give me the warning of don't put the alcohol out there. But I could see how people would make those mistakes. So well, thanks for like fun memories, war stories, the safety briefings. Like, that's the first legit safety briefing. Like, you have to give that when people show up, because I know people would think about doing it. So I love it. That brings me back. But so I don't take the whole time on war stories. Hey, everybody, Acuity International is one of our partner companies. They got a lot of incredible roles. They've got a bunch of Army guys recruiting for them. That's really cool. Veterans recruiting veterans. And Robert, why don't you, if you have in a minute or so, why don't you let us know what Acuity does in your words?
Yeah. So when you're looking at Acuity, I've been here for 5 years. They kind of do a bit of everything. We first started out as multiple different companies, came into one, first as Caliber and now Acuity. But like Jonathan over there, he's part of Build, which is munitions, engineering aspects. I'm part of the security, which would be looking at Department of State contracts, doing protective security for like officials at embassies and consulates. We also have medical contracts that are overseas, and we do have some when they do come up, emergency contracts across the U.S. Mm-hmm. And we are getting the case manager work that usually happens in the southern region of America, and also expanding up to different countries throughout the U.S. But that's pretty much us in a nutshell. We kind of do a little bit of everything. So if you're interested and have a interesting background, you can always reach out to us.
I love that. Interesting and have an interesting background. That sounds awesome. So, I love it. So basically, if you are interested in going overseas and working in intel, security, medical, like kind of still being engaged in a mission, supporting the State Department or something like that, you guys would be a great place to start. But then there's also other opportunities. I think Jonathan was mentioning opportunities in Hawaii, helping rebuild after Maui. So, Jonathan, can you talk more about like what you do and what build is and maybe that opportunity?
Yeah, so as far as build, what we're doing right now is we have a contract that we're actually going to be getting awarded this week, and it's for construction, for housing, pretty much to rebuild the island, put in infrastructure, housing, just get people back to being able to live their normal lives. So basically, we're hiring a bunch of project managers. Coordinators, a bunch of different roles on the engineering side to help assist with these efforts. And then also too, we have jobs that are, munitions, destroy old munitions, old bombs, stuff that hasn't blown up, stuff that we found in the field and whatnot. We have, locations that we go out and detonate those munitions.
So for the Hawaii work in Maui,
Yeah.
Is that going to be, you're looking for people that live on Maui, or is that something where you fly them out for a project, or like how long is a project? How many people?
Yeah.
Are you thinking you're going to hire? What's it kind of look like?
So right now we're in the early stages of the contract. So we're just hiring a skeleton team to go out there, and it is an on-site position. So all of the candidates would have to live on the island. So right now we're looking for people that live in the general area, some locals. And then if we can't find qualified candidates in the local community there, then we'll start outsourcing, to other locations and seeing if we could get people to move to Hawaii, which I don't think it would be that very hard to do.
No, I mean, I guess my question is, where would they live when they're there?
Yeah. So in the meantime, they have temporary housing that they'll put them up in, like portable buildings, same kind of stuff we were living in whenever we were deployed overseas to Iraq and Afghanistan, until they start getting, everything built up over there.
How long do you think this project's going to be? A couple years?
Yeah, I think it's going to be years from the sounds of it. It's just now we're just now getting involved in it. We've been, going back and forth, working on the contract. So like I said, this week, we should be getting the award, and I think we'll be working on this for probably at least the next 2 to 3 years.
Awesome. I mean, it sounds like what I love about your roles at Acuity is it appeals to the veteran that wants to travel, the veteran that wants to go do something different, something interesting, like you said, Robert. There's an opportunity there to go and stay in temporary housing, make some pretty good money, and do something that is so important for people in the island. And I'll tell you what, I've never lived in temporary housing in a location as beautiful as Maui.
Yeah.
So like it's definitely better than what I stayed in Iraq and Afghanistan. So
yeah, absolutely.
I saw the smile on both of your faces. I know you lived you have a similar expression. So
yeah.
And then, Robert, what for the worldwide protective services stuff you guys do, like what kinds of locations are you looking for? Is it just Iraq and Somalia, or is it all over?
So for the Worldwide Protective Services, or WIPS, because I'll probably be saying WIPS a lot, our two primary locations is Erbil, Iraq, and Mogadishu, Somalia. We are bidding on other contracts. There are a few more still coming up. But at least for Erbil, Iraq, we have it for the next 9 years.
Wow.
So it's not going away anytime soon. So we do have that, but kind of like I said, interesting, different backgrounds is pretty much we're looking for everything. we have security, we have logistics, intel, leadership roles, admin. I mean, you kind of name it. We have those positions.
I remember. I was going to say, I remember when I was in Iraq, we had soldiers that were up in Erbil, and that was like the place everybody wanted to go. Like Erbil was one of the safest places to be in theater. Is it still like that?
Yeah, it's. I mean, yes, you're in Iraq, but you're in the Kurd area. So I mean,
Right.
It's pretty. It's not too bad or anything like that up there. Living arrangements. I mean, you'll be living in a villa style setting, so it'd be actually what we were living in.
Send me.
So, you got your kitchen, full kitchen over there, so you cook your own food. So I mean, it's pretty good living arrangements, and I mean Somalia, but I mean you're pretty much on the compound. You're not usually leaving that compound too often. You'd be living kind of like a hotel live and stay. So you have a room to yourself, all that good stuff. And I can at least say the pay. I mean, I will say our lowest is pretty good. So
yeah.
But I mean, it's pretty much open for a lot of different people.
Awesome. Yeah, and I know, like, I knew an Air Force Chief Master Sergeant that retired, and he had a special operations background, but his last role wasn't in special operations, and he wanted to get back into the fight, and he actually like signed on to go work on security on the tankers that go through like the Gulf there, like to fight off the pilots. He wanted pirates. He just wanted to like shoot pirates and stuff. And I'm like, like there's people that want to do that. Like they want to get back into the fight. And so, no, I think that there's a lot of people in our community that would be interested in those, and hopefully they'll take you guys up on it. So I don't want to just talk about like acuity roles right now. I want people to know your stories and maybe get some advice on the office hours episode. So, I guess let's start with you, Jonathan. Can you kind of talk about like your background and your path, like how you ended up where you are?
Yeah. So I was in the Army for 20 years. I initially came in as an engineer doing construction. And then I did that for about 6 years initially. And then I got picked up for recruiting duty in 2006. And I came out. I thought I was going to be getting a break. Really wasn't a break. I might as well have been deployed. But I did that for about 4 or 5 years. I was a detailed recruiter. And then after that, you get the option to, you can either convert and be a full-time recruiter, or you can go back to your old MOS on the line. So recruiting was good to me. I was good at it. It came natural to me. It wasn't, very hard. And then I had other buddies that were out here that were struggling to deal with it. They just didn't want to be here, didn't want to be a part of it. So anyways, at that time, I thought to myself, this is where I'm supposed to be. This is where, I'm going to be the best fit for the Army and be able to be the most useful, so to speak. But anyhow, so I converted after 5 years, and then I went on to run recruiting stations. I ran small stations, large stations. And then after that, my last 3 years, I went on to work in the training shop here in San Antonio. I did that for the last 3. So after that, after I retired, it really, the transition from the Army to the civilian side really wasn't too hard for me, being that I had a recruiting background. That really helped me quite a bit. I did have to go through, a couple different jobs before I found Acuity. But once I found Acuity, I knew that this was a good fit for me. And, coming out of the Army, everyone goes through, that, well, what's it going to be like, or if I'm going to find something, or what if I don't like the company? And, I had to go through a couple to be able to find that. And once I got to Acuity, I knew this is where I belong. This is where I fit in. And especially when I came in, I started out working on case managers. And then after that, I got switched over to working on whips with Bobby's team. And that just blew my mind. That's when I knew this is where I needed to be, because he's recruiting for the exact same positions as we were, you know, in the Army. And we're just picking these guys up on the back end, you know, putting them back on, you know, doing the same thing they were doing on the civilian side. Now on the civilian side, making a lot more money.
Yeah.
But anyhow, so I've been with Acuity for almost 2 years now. It's been good to me. There's a lot of veterans that work here, like Bobby and myself. So I see myself here for quite some time in the future.
I love it. I love it. I always like to, you know, look at people's stories. And I think what's interesting is hindsight's 2020, but you were in construction. You were in engineering for your first like 5-6 years. Then you went into recruiting.
Yeah.
And now you're a recruiting manager for construction contracts.
Like
the build stuff. Like,
how
cool is that? No, I'm just gonna say, like, that's cool. Like, you would have not have thought of that, like, when you were transitioning, right? You never thought, like, hey, let me go be a recruiter for companies to hire people to work on construction.
No.
Right?
No.
But the world kind of like that path is usually like this. But when you look back, it's like it was a straight line. You gained experiences that made you successful where you are now.
Absolutely.
So how did you find, if you don't mind me asking, how did you find Acuity? Like, how did you get into Acuity? You know,
so with you, you'll probably like to hear this. All the jobs that I found since I've been out of the Army have been networking and, you know, talking to people through LinkedIn, going out to, you know, these after hour get-togethers, you know, that they have all the time here locally. But to be quite honest with you, I came across John on LinkedIn, and I was just putting myself out there, you know, looking for a job, and he reached out to me, and we interviewed, and everything went well. And after that, I got hired on and started working with them, hiring case managers. You know, so, you know, back to your story, what you were saying a minute ago, you know, I came in the Army as construction, and now, you know, we're recruiting for construction. That wasn't planned in any way.
right.
It is funny, when I ended up here, I was like, what a coincidence. But that's how I ended up with Acuity, networking through LinkedIn, and just talking to people.
And then, if you don't mind, one other question: how does recruiting now differ to recruiting in the Army?
It's pretty similar as far as, you know, the recruiting aspect of it. The only part that's really a lot different here on the outside is you're negotiating salaries, you're negotiating, you know, benefits and stuff like that, to where in the Army, it was a package deal. This is what you're getting. You know, everybody got the same thing. It was cut and dry. And it is a little bit different over here. You know, you have to negotiate more. And it is a little bit easier to get people to, you know, commit to a job out here than it is to get someone to join the Army to go overseas.
Right.
So that is a little bit different of a challenge there.
For the negotiation piece, I don't want to get too in depth into that.
Yeah.
But one of the things, like, do you ever get upset when someone negotiates, or is it just expected, you know, as a part of the process?
Well, yeah, out here it's expected. In the Army, it wasn't expected. So
right.
Whenever I was an Army recruiter, it wasn't expected. But out here, it is expected. And it does take a little while, you know, going from not negotiating things like that and going back and forth about pay and benefits and stuff, you know, and out here, it's something that's really expected from the candidate. You know, and it's their right, you know, to value what they're worth and what they're looking for, and to meet some of their expectations as well. But yeah, sorry, I'm rambling off a little bit.
No, I love it. I'm just, because I know so many transitioning military don't negotiate.
Yeah.
Like that's why I want people to understand, like, you know, if you don't negotiate, you're probably leaving money, time, you know, benefits on the table. I mean, it's
Absolutely.
there. My only one piece of advice is, if you say, like, here's my range, and they give you the top of your range, don't try to get more. That's my thing. Like if you say I want 80 to 100 and they're
Yeah.
like, here's 100. You're like, now I want 110. Like for me, that's like, then I'm like, now it's personal. Like
Yeah.
don't like do your research on the front end. That's just me personally. Am I wrong, Robert? Or like I don't move the goalpost.
I'm right. I mean, I'll make my comment of negotiating when it's my turn to talk.
It's your turn now. Go. Look at that.
I mean, again, I did 6 years as an intel analyst in the Army. And when I got out, the wife was into, she did 10 years, but we moved to Tennessee, and lo and behold, there's not an intel community really down there. So when I got out, I went into construction and actually didn't even know anything about negotiating. And I actually lowballed myself pretty hard to the construction company. I was like, yeah, I'll take on a minimum wage. I don't really care. I just want a job to do. So
And they gave it to you?
they didn't get me wrong. I mean, they gave me a good pay. Don't get me wrong about that, but
it was a lot less than everybody else.
Yes, I mean it just at that point I didn't understand that. I literally went through my SFL tap of 2 weeks, and I built a resume and a LinkedIn profile, and that was it when I left. So not a lot there. So because we just got done with JRTC too, that was awesome.
Nobody wants to go there.
Yeah, no, but
Nobody wants to go
No.
Yeah, no. After construction, it was a good time. A lot of skills you learn in those different trades. And I actually wouldn't take it back for anything. But went to a research company afterwards. Did that for about a year. They lost their contract. But I accidentally applied to our rack position, not realizing it was overseas at the time. And like I told you all before, but the wife was definitely shut that down real quick. And they offered me the recruiting job instead. So came in, did my interview, came on. It was great. That was 5 years ago for me. Never been a recruiter in my life. So it's been great, honestly.
I love it. So how do you accidentally apply for a job in Iraq?
So
in Iraq.
You see,
that's that intel. What do they say? Military intelligence is an oxymoron.
Yes, that is.
I'm a former intel guy. I can say that. So
I can't express how accurate that is. But yeah, the location was technically set to the previous office in Lenore City, Tennessee. And I was like, oh, cool. It's right there. It's not too far away. Well, if you read the fine print, it will actually say, hey, you're going to Iraq for this position. I didn't read the fine print. It was a good time.
I love it. So how did you, so you applied and they're like, oh, here's this sharp intel guy, construction background. He's willing to go to Iraq. Let's interview him. Like, was it John that interviewed you?
No, it was actually Greg Null. I think he's actually still with this company, and I think he's been doing it for 7+ years now with us. But he called me up. Actually, that's a lie. He sent me the document request, and I can explain that later. And Jonathan knows about this one. It's a lot of documents that we send people. And I kind of looked at it, I was like, what did I just sign up for? So I called him up real quick. He's like, yeah, this is in Iraq. I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm probably not going to be able to pull that one off with the wife. So he's like, well, we do have recruiting if you are local to our area. And I'm like, yeah. And it's like, well, come on, swing by through next week. And we'll do an interview. And from there, I interviewed with Jim, got the job position. So,
wow, that's pretty cool. So, like, that says something positive to me about, Acuity. The fact that, like, you applied for the wrong role, but the guy still is the guy a veteran too that interviewed you? The first guy.
Yes. So the John Vest was interviewed and Eric. Oh, Greg Null. Actually, he was not.
Wow.
He was not a veteran for that one, but our current team is all veterans. So
yeah. I just love that, like,
Yeah, it was.
oops, I don't want to go to Iraq. Never mind. Well, hey, we got a recruiter role. You seem like a cool dude. Come on by the office. Like, that's amazing to me. And here we are 5 years later. So,
Yeah, it's good.
So we've got about 4 minutes left. I want to give you each a chance to just, like, what is your advice to someone getting out of the military? Like, what's your top, like, you got 2 minutes, 3 minutes each. Like, what is the top advice you would give someone getting out that, for themselves, and then, like, that might be interested in a career with Acuity? Like, Jonathan, you want to start first?
So what I think the best thing that I found whenever transitioning out of the Army was just networking, man, talking to people, being open, getting out of your comfort zone, going to, these after hour get-togethers and shaking hands and just meeting people, getting out there and putting yourself out there. And I would say don't lose sight of really what you're looking for. Stay focused, keep moving, and don't settle for anything less than what you want. Especially, me being in the Army for so long, I always told myself when I got out, I was going to do something that I enjoyed doing, that I was happy doing. And I was happy doing recruiting in the Army. That's why I stayed in it for so long.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say just, networking, talking to people, and stay focused, and don't lose sight of the goal.
Awesome. And when you talk about don't settle for anything less than your worth, how do you determine what you're worth?
So for me, I mean, me personally, it's what you bring to the table, your experiences, your past experiences, what you've done. And also too, your trainability, going to companies, being open to learning new things. Just because I did, 20 years in the Army recruiting doesn't mean I know everything out here. And I actually, it's kind of weird, me being a recruiting manager and Robert's working on whips. And Robert, has taught me a lot of stuff, working with Acuity in the short time that I worked over at whips with them. So I know I'm kind of getting off track there a little bit, but just knowing, I mean, within yourself what your value is and what you bring to the table and what you can do.
Awesome. Thank you. And then Robert, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, on top of Jonathan said, I mean, network is pretty huge, and putting yourself out there. Also, from my own experience, mistakes, do your research, research that company, research that position, how it's going, especially in the contracting field. Because I can tell you, like, our contract, there is hard limit requirements that no one can get around. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot in the corporate world where it's not hard limits. Mm-hmm. So if you see something that that you can do, one, have your resume prepped for that job position, but also just know going in, they're not hard limits when you're looking at corporate or a lot of different positions out there. So you apply anyways and see what you do, because the big thing is the interview. If you can get to that interview phase and knock them out, then you're pretty much good to go on that one. But that's the biggest thing I have for you is when you're looking at the requirements, just know most of them are kind of a lot more flexible than what they say.
No, that's a great point. Government contracts, like, you must have this. Like, that's it. Like, these are the requirements. For the private sector, someone just kind of made that up. And there is often some kind of flexibility in that. Great point. I also love when it comes to contracts that you said the contract in reveals for 9 more years. That's the other thing I always tell people is ask how long the contract is and if it's already awarded. So it's great to hear you guys have some of these longer term contracts that will support people. So thank you, both of you, for joining us. I really enjoyed the lead up and this. I now know don't store my alcohol outside in Fairbanks, Alaska, right? Very, very important. The physics of that do make sense. But I also feel like I got a great feel for Acuity, and I'm excited to kind of share you with my audience. And my question would be is if anyone tuning into this has questions, are you okay with them reaching out to you on LinkedIn?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. I was excited to hear about these roles, Acuity. Thank you for all you do for our community. I know you're still engaging every day with transitioning military, giving that advice and feedback they need. So thank you, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.